a year, along with my coworker Joe Gonzalez, who's sitting in the audience giving us support. We both basically started about a year ago on the same day, each with different backgrounds. My situation particularly, I have two boys on the autism spectrum, Alex, who's 11, and Adam, who just turned 16. So Adam's going into his junior year. In fact, I just went down to the high school and we got his name tag today, and we're doing all that kind of thing. I feel really good for Adam, though, because I think he's going to really thrive this year. It's been really helpful because his middle school teacher followed him to high school. So we put in that special request. They made that happen. No, I'm just kidding.
Wow.
That was all
That's
just
lucky.
But it was really awesome, and I think it kind of helped with his transition to high school from middle school. My youngest, Alex, who's 11, he's just going into middle school. Mm-hmm. So he just graduated from elementary school. We're getting him all taken care of, and we had his transition to middle school IEP not too long ago. Went through some goals and things like that. What else about me? I think that pretty much sort of covers about me.
Awesome. So thanks for sharing your story, Casey. So while we're going through this, if you have questions online, please type them into the chat box. And those of you in our audience, please, if you have a question, raise your hand, and we'll answer your questions as we move through. But the way this came about is we were traveling and talking about what it's like to raise our kids with disabilities. And because that's what we do here, we raise kids with disabilities and special health care needs. And throughout the lifespan, we serve families birth to 26, and all of us have different experiences. And we were talking, and it's summer, and we were trying to figure out what to do with our kiddos, and then it kind of dawned on us as we were working through the caregivers conference. We talk about caregiving to our kids, with our kids across the lifespan, and what do we do with our kids that have disabilities throughout the summer? Those that don't fit in that box of they're too old for childcare, but they can't be left home alone. And then we start school, and we're starting, I remember we started services right out of the NICU in the hospital. We left the NICU, and we're in the infant toddler program, PT, OT, speech, nursing level of services at home. We came home with a nurse, we came home with monitors and all kinds of stuff. And then at 2.5, we're talking about preschool. And I'm like, well, he's 2. What do you mean preschool? We're not even sitting up and rolling. Preschool I was a preschool teacher, and preschool meant something completely different to me, that we were learning our letters and talking and things like that. And so I didn't understand what preschool and early intervention meant to kids with disabilities. And so we're trying to raise a kiddo, and he's our third one. And I taught preschool to my older children, and it was different. So here I am raising my little one, who at adjusted age is how we speak in NICU terms, with a micro-preemie, who was born in August with a due date of November. We're sending him to preschool at an adjusted age of 2.5, and he's 3 because he's born in August. So school starts in September. Well, it starts at the end of August. And so I'm putting my tiny little guy in a wheelchair that's like, the wheelchair is this big and he's this big, and on a bus, and he's throwing up, and we're thinking he's sick because for a few days he's throwing up. So he stays home because we're like, I can't send him to school throwing up because it's against the rules. So for 2 weeks we do this, and finally by the second week we're like, he's got to start. we got to get him going. And so we realized that he's just acting up. 2.5-year-old just acting up. Let's just send him to school. We'll throw towels on him and get him to school. So finally, we just send our poor little kiddo to school. And, now we're 14 and it dawns on me when we're going through services and talking about services and going to the doctor and now that I'm working here, realizing that he's not acting up, he was trying to tell us something. He was trying to tell us that he was nervous and he was scared and he didn't want to go to preschool. He's 2.5 and terrified, but he can't talk. And so here I am 13 years later, feeling like the worst mom on the planet. My little guy is trying to tell me that he was scared to go to school. Well, who wouldn't be? Mm-hmm. This big giant yellow thing comes down the street making all sorts of noise and making this like really loud hissing sound when it stops and picks you up and takes you away from your mom. And I'm just feeling the guilt. So now we're going to junior high or high school. He's 14 and we're starting high school. And we were talking about, what do parents need? What do they want to know? And how can we help our families with kids with special health care needs and disabilities as we go make this transition from summer to high school, back to school, behaviors, and moving on to make this transition from summer to school when we're seeing an increase of behaviors with our kids and this disengagement from school to home and make it easier for our families. So we decided to do a little bit of research and see what other parent centers were doing and find some tips to help families feel a little bit better about being ready to send their kids to school. So hopefully you find this information useful. And if you've got tips of your own, ideas, please share. We have made mistakes along the way. We're going to continue to make mistakes along the way as parents. But we have found information that is vetted, that is important to know, that we've talked with educators, we've talked with parents, and found this information to be practiced and helpful. So these are the top 10 things that we have discovered will help as we move along in this journey. So do you want to go ahead and introduce those?
Sure. So here are the 10 tips that we have. They're certainly not going to be comprehensive. I'm sure there's just hundreds of tips out there. These are 10 of the ones that we thought were really important. We came up with some of them based on different trends of parents who call in and talk about different issues, like number 7, eligibility determination for IEPs. Behaviors can be a common topic that we work through those behaviors, and some of the less things that you might not think about is just emergency preparedness, self-care for both the child and the caregiver, and organization, those types of things. So again, these aren't listed in any particular order, but just sort of like a natural way that we designed the presentation. So
yep. So jump in anytime online in the office if we're going too fast. So preparation, these are just some of the things that we think about, some of the things that we've forgotten along the way. School. So we were talking, and I work in one district as an adjunct faculty member, walk-on coach, and I have a child. My kids go to a different school district, a neighboring school district, and they both start on a different Monday. So keeping them separated and trying to balance those out are hard. And the whole state and all the districts start on a different day. And then we've got kids that are in year round and kids that start that are in charter schools. Like my niece started school today, and my sister sent me a picture of her waiting for the bus on her first day of school. So just the whole city getting ready for kids to start school. at a different timeline, and being ready for that. I don't know how families and teachers can keep it straight all the time and then being ready. So we found a 4-week plan of preparedness, getting ready, on understood.org, which is an amazing website. That's where some of our handouts came from, which is a similar organization to ours. It's not a parent center, but it is a group of parents that put together resources that have been tried, and methods that have been used to get families prepared. But every single day is a preparation tool to get ready. But I have even had a hard time, and I went on the website to get my son registered for high school, and their website's not even up and running, and he's not even on their website. He's not even in their records to pay for the school fees. So I don't even know how I'm supposed to do that as a parent. So the schools are struggling to keep up. Websites are struggling to keep up. Schools are moving to a more online, somewhat streamlined online format to register their kids. So keeping that in mind, keeping in mind that everyone is trying to stay up with the times, especially in this transition year where school boards have voted to change the times of, and especially in West Ada, in the Boise area, and the Treasure Valley, in some of our larger school districts in Idaho, have voted to change the time, the end of the year and the start of the school year. Transitioning to that new timeline in our minds is kind of hard to handle. And so a shorter summer or a longer summer, and keeping up with that is hard. So are we at a new school? So to me, my high school is a new school. It's not a new school district, but it's a new school. So do I have the right information? We're meeting a whole new team after spending 3 years finally getting used to a team. Did I register? Well, I think I registered, but apparently the school doesn't think I registered because he's not in there. He's still at the middle school because I accidentally clicked the middle school and he's still in there. But and then transportation, how are we going to get there, and things like that? Are we within the walk zone? Is a mile, if you're a gen ed student, a mile is generally the walk zone. So you wouldn't qualify for transportation, and those types of things. So free and reduced lunch, that's always something that the schools encourage families to apply for, even if you know you might not qualify. Every year, the qualifications and the income guidelines change. So it's a good idea to try to apply.
I would say, in addition to all those sort of preparation topics, start early. Try not to wait until
till the day before registration.
I would start, as a general rule, try to start at least midsummer, if not the beginning, just to be thinking about things, talking to your kids about how they feel about the school year that they just completed, maybe some different personal goals that they had in mind, how they might want to do better, keeping that communication going is certainly can be a positive thing. So yeah.
Checking the school supplies lists, knowing, what's required, those kinds of things. I like to stock up on school supplies. That's my favorite shopping season. And then any additional resources that you might need, immunizations, are those up to date? Any records that you might need, medications that can be refilled, just all those little things that seem to fall in the cracks. What is the school going to require? If you're not doing immunizations, do you need to sign a waiver? Those kinds of things. Medical history. Gosh, trying to think of what we need when we register for school. All that stuff. I feel like I fill out I need to hand over a 500-page document when I register for school sometimes. But those are the things that we need. So. Oh, what are you going to do before and after care? One thing we forgot to mention this morning is that those of us who do have kiddos with disabilities, and if you're on the developmental disabilities waiver, before school, it's a good time to, if you need extra hands in the morning, there are some families that do have extra help or personal care services. That's not on the DD waiver, but if you do qualify for personal care services, which is part of the plan, if you qualify for the state plan, you can have someone come in the morning and help you prepare for those morning activities, the getting ready for school, and then getting them out the door, things like that. So if you want extra hands, you need extra hands, those are hours that you can ask for extra help. So,
and we have information about that. It's in my experience, it's called PCS services. It can be a little difficult to find, but you can just call, if you have any questions about it, you can certainly call our office and we can kind of guide you in the right direction. So,
yep. So let's move on to the next tip, which is anxiety. So I have anxiety as soon as the last day of school happens. What?
You had anxiety when we started today.
I did. Our kids have anxiety. They feed off of our anxiety. I found this great tip and handout for anxiety for each grade level, and how to help ease the anxiety for our kids. Grade school all the way up through high school in each grade. Anxiety can increase as our kids' bodies changes, their biological changes, their physiological changes, what can increase immensely. And those could have nothing to do with their disabilities. It's all just a natural part of life. So keeping that in mind will also help us ease those anxieties and realize that those are normal parts of life.
And then just thinking, I always like to add in that anxiety that a child feels or any parent feels about starting anything new. It's a fleeting experience. It's going to pass. And then as you go start the new year, you're a month or two in, all of a sudden it becomes the new normal. Everybody's getting their routines down. Everybody's finishing the other person's sentences, things like that. Well, I don't know about that, but it becomes it becomes the new normal, and then you get through it. So, yeah.
Right. So with anxiety, there's ways to kind of help combat that. And whatever, if there are really some general concerns about that, always speak to your pediatrician and get some extra help. But there's some ways to help with that are keeping those healthy habits, sleep, nutrition, drinking water. I know that sounds silly, but water, exercise, just going for a walk.
And also mastering,
scream into a pillow.
Yeah, and also mastering all these 10 tips that were. So if you master these 10 tips,
you're solid. You could just sail through life, no problem. No, all joking aside, anxiety is real, and practicing those routines and just seeking help. Practicing the new routine is going to be very helpful. I don't know of anyone that's been able to do something new without trying it a few times. When I'm coaching, I tell my kids that it might take 10 to 12 times before you actually get it even a little bit right, and that's okay. I don't know where we came up with this idea of perfection on the first try, but it's impossible. I'm the age that I am, and I'm still messing up on a lot of things. So we try so hard to be so perfect, and it's okay to make a mistake. And we're going to fall down a lot, and to let ourselves be okay with that, and let our kids be okay with that, and know that these are normal things that happen in our lives, and that everyone feels like this, and to be okay with that. So Also to help ease the anxiety is to help your kids establish someone to talk to, whether that's you, and if it's not you as a parent, be okay with that, I guess. I learned that I have to be okay that my teenage boys, my 20-year-old and 18-year-old, don't want to tell me things. And they don't have to tell me things. And they don't want to, and I'm okay with that. Took me a long time, and plus there's things I don't want to know. We were pretty open and honest with our kids, and there are things that I don't want to know, and I'm really okay with that. So yeah, I'm just babbling, so we can move on to the next one.
All right. All right, let's move on to
moves right on into helping ease anxiety, and I just talked right over you, so go for it.
Oh, it's I think being organized is sort of a fundamental step in reducing anxiety overall. I mean, if you can predict something that's going to happen, whether that's on your calendar or whether it's an event or a circumstance that you might be facing, if you can anticipate that, then you're going to have less anxiety because you're going to have a better idea of how to respond to said event.
Right.
A couple of different topics under organization is and time management is health plan. So health plan can be a part of an IEP if you have a child with a disability. It can be talking about any child's overall health, especially during that transition from summer to school. And we kind of talked about, making sure if you have to do immunizations and records and things like that, and see what the policies are on that. Developing good study habits, maybe talk to your children about what worked for them last year, and some of the strength that they've achieved, and weaknesses that they identified from last year to make them better in organizing those types of things. Avoid procrastination. That kind of is like the flip side of, or no, it kind of means the same thing as don't wait until a couple of days before something is due. Something that I like to do is if I have a big project coming up, or if there's something down the road that I know I'm going to have to do, but I'm putting it off, maybe break it up into smaller, manageable subtasks and do a little bit every day. You can break it up into like mini tasks, or even if a mini task is too difficult of a daunting of an experience, you can break it up into little 10-minute. Do something for 10 minutes, and then whatever you get done, you're done for the day, and then try again for the next day.
Right.
And then you'll eventually get it done, or you'll get the confidence to keep moving forward. Use checklists. Of course, you can use organization notebooks. I like to use my reminders app to let me know if Alex or Adam has a dental appointment in 5.5 months. I'll put it in my reminder, set it for a week before. There it is. That way I'm not getting that call from
Casey's tried to teach me how to use OneNote. I'm a notebook person.
It's because you like
clearly I like paper.
Yeah, well, we're all different. We all like to do things different, and
what works for you.
Figure out how our brains work and everything. And then again, just learning that new normal. Anytime you transition from one normal to another, the new normal it stays new until it becomes the new normal, and then it's the normal. So.
Right. Yeah. So, I'll confess that while the bus is coming down the street, pulling the notes out of the backpack and checking off to make sure I didn't forget something that morning, or hurrying up and writing the note to the teacher, or checking the communication log sometimes. Not all the time, but we get busy, and that's okay. we have to give ourselves a little bit of grace and remember that we're busy too, and that but to find some sort of organization and time management tips. These are some examples, and there are some handouts that you got emailed and that are in your packets that are some tips to help your kids find those graphic organizing tools to help them remember and help them learn to organize and teach them how to organize themselves, and create those checklists. The backpack checklist. Did you remember to grab this and get this, and this is what goes in your backpack before school, and this is what you need to take to school. You can laminate it, use a write-on like the dry erase marker to check it off. I've found that that's very helpful for me to remember what to grab. I'll actually take pictures of my child with that item so they can actually see what it looks like, or he can see what it looks like. Because he's nonverbal, the visuals are very helpful for him to see what he actually needs and to check that off. It actually also helps with my 18-year-old who has ADHD and has a hard time staying focused, and the 5 items are about all he can remember. He did graduate from high school just fine, and we're going to college, but just thinking in those little steps are crucial for his organizational skills, and that's okay for him. And then to establish and maintain that master calendar. We live on a calendar. We live with a calendar. If we didn't have a calendar, there are times when I've forgotten to write on the calendar, and it just creates chaos in our family. No one can think beyond the calendar. And it actually drives me crazy sometimes, because it's like, you guys, what happens if I am gone one day? I know they'll figure it out, but it's just those repetitive routines and staying organized that really save our lives. And then I get ready for the next day the night before. I leave the house sometimes 3 days a week at 5:30 a.m. and I don't get home until 6 p.m. sometimes. And so being prepared and having all that stuff ready, everything's labeled and ready, and it's a little bit neurotic, but it's just the way we are, and that works for us. If you have any suggestions or things that are done different, we have pictures and labels and everywhere. And especially when you have multiple people caring for your child or for in and out of your home, it's been very helpful for us to stay organized and that way. So moving on to communication, there's a few different ways to communicate with your school, within your school. Are we going to have we're going to talk about school-wide communication and then communication within and out of the classroom. So going back to school, you usually come home with a multitude of emails or handouts, a newsletter, how the school communicates and then how the classroom communicates. So how does your school handle visitors, and what's the visitor policy? Some schools require you to schedule appointments to come in and visit in the classrooms. Some have an open door policy. Every school operates differently. It just really depends on the principal and how that works. You do have to sign in. That's not different school-wide or school to school, but each school does operate. Are they welcoming and open, or how do they operate with visitors and volunteers? And how does that work? So and building that trusting relationship with the family members and the secretaries and the nursing staff and the personnel. Sharing those positive experiences are important as well when working with the school. If you're going to volunteer, follow through. How are you going to volunteer? I always start out awesome, and then I kind of fizzle off because it's like, we always have good intentions, and then we get busy, and
yeah.
And
that actually is a good segue into identifying issues early on. especially when things do get hectic and things do get busy. People kind of get caught in their own little world and everything. As a parent, I want to, talk to my teachers and school administration early, let them know my level of involvement. I don't want to, seem too overbearing or anything, but I don't want them to seem, I want to find just that right amount, but, that way teachers can see that you are, you want to support them in what they do. And then also, I think I said identifying issues early before so for the purpose of identifying them early before they kind of get out of hand, whether it's behaviors or maybe the student is sort of falling behind in their schoolwork, or maybe they're starting to accrue some absences, anything like that. Just about everything, if identified early, can be pretty remedied easily earlier on. So,
right. And I think too, to really emphasize sharing those positive experiences will help create that proactive relationship, no matter what. We don't want to seem too overbearing, but also to establish that we're on each other's side and we're ready to work together. And
then before I forget, how maybe come up with a plan for how you want to communicate with your teachers. With my youngest, it's always been, and this is because he's pretty nonverbal. I mean, he knows sight words and things like that, but he can't tell me how his day was, or kind of communicate like that. So we've always used a comm log, like just a notebook that you put in his backpack, and then we'll open it, and then the teacher will say how he did, what he's working on, or what behaviors he might have had that day, or how he's feeling that day. And then we might write back and say he's, doing this or that. If the comm log, if you feel like that could be beneficial and you have a child who's nonverbal, who's on an IEP, I can tell you it's helped me because Alex can't tell me how his day was. And then so that I have in our IEP meeting, we have that in his IEP that we establish a comm log, and, it's not every day. It usually is more busy at the beginning of the year because everybody's kind of gung-ho, but then just like everything else, as time goes on, things kind of become routine and you get that new normal type of thing going. With my oldest, Adam, it seems like it's always either text message or Facebook or social media. We're able to contact and share information that way. That's not something that would be an automatic expectation of a teacher. You'd have to talk to them about it, how they feel about being friends on Facebook. Some want to have that professional distance with parents. Some just aren't that tech savvy or something. Some like to, pull out their big pen and, do it that way. But whatever works for the teacher and the parent, that you guys can communicate, because that can be really important, because if so much time goes on, things can happen like, oh, I didn't know that my child was this far behind in this homework because he's not telling me that. And it kind of goes both ways. So,
right, which leads us kind of into our next tip, was to identify issues. So now that we're moving along into the school year, we're getting into those routines, and we're establishing systems, and everyone's getting used to the way the school year is going. We're now into a couple months of school, and we're getting used to the environment, like I said, and the routines, and it's now we should start seeing some progress. The school, the classroom, the teachers are getting to know the students and doing their mental assessments and their observations, and whether or not your child is accessing special education or accommodations or things like that. This is where we're going to notice if progress is regressing or being made. For example, I had my oldest, who is now 20, his first grade teacher noticed that he sat in the back of the classroom, and he was pretty bright kiddo, and he all of a sudden just kind of stopped talking and was pretty quiet. And then he would do this, and he wasn't answering any questions anymore. And finally he just kind of thought, and he was a new teacher, he was a young guy, and decided to move him to the front of the class, and he finally was able to answer some questions. And so he called me one day, the end of that day, and he said, I noticed that Boston was squinting, and so I moved him up to the front of the class, and I think he might need to go see the eye doctor. And lo and behold, we get a prescription with some really thick glasses. The poor kid couldn't see, and his dad at the same age had really thick glasses, and this kid, poor little guy, 20 years old, and got his dad's eyes. So those accommodations were made because the teacher had the forthwith to, make those observations. And those are some things that we had when we established a relationship, and that communication, we can identify some of those issues. Those are accommodations that a teacher does not have to make a formal assessment for. And a teacher can make an accommodation without notifying a parent. However, moving on to assessments, if there is a bigger issue, there are more and more behaviors happening. Our child is failing. We're in high school, and our kids are maybe they're already on an IEP and they're not making any progress. And they're being sent home a lot, or to the principal's office, or whatever. If the family, the parent, the guardian, or the teacher feels like we might need to do a formal assessment, they can request that a formal assessment be done. And so,
which requires consent.
Which requires consent from the parent or guardian. And we next month, we're going to talk about that whole process. So we're not going to get too far into the weeds, but an official request for a referral is done. And we have a template for that on our website that just expresses concerns, requests for an official evaluation for anything, anywhere, in the areas of concern. So, and that's given to the teacher or the counselor, the principal, in some cases, the special education director, the special ed teacher, depending on what the situation might be, where the child is at, what grade level. And then the family, the parent is given a formal consent to evaluate. And then the assessment is done only in the areas of those areas of concern. And then observations are made, and then eligibility is determined, whether or not they're determined eligible for special education or just need some extra accommodation.
That sort of goes right into our next slide there.
So do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So, so if a parent or teacher or whoever, makes observations or recommendations or notes any kind of, if a student is going behind in one area, or kind of talked about in your case.
Concerns.
Yeah. So there's different, there's two basic programs that are covered by two different laws. So you have the 504 plan, which is basically an accommodations plan. The 504, meaning Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, basically falls under civil rights law, and where you have an IEP, individuals falls under. So it's the individual education program that falls under IDEA, which is special education law. A 504 basically having a plan in place to remove any kind of barriers that are identified as preventing the student from accessing the general education environment. So in that case,
Access.
He moved up to the front of the classroom. And it doesn't have to be an official 504 plan. It was a simple accommodation that was made based on a simple observation by the teacher. But if there are other concerns, if your child has a qualifying disability, which in my case, both my children are on IEPs because they both have autism, which is one of the qualifying things.
Disabilities.
Yeah, then they can have an IEP in place, which is basically individualized instruction, so that they can have free, appropriate public education and everything like that.
All these lovely names and laws and acronyms.
Yeah.
And different services that fall under these programs. So,
and IEPs, they can be intensive or they can be pretty mild. It all depends on what
your child needs.
The least restrictive environment type of thing. So, because you don't want to inhibit them, but you want to give them enough support that they need, that they can succeed and everything. So, and again, we'll get into IEP type stuff next month. So
then a couple other things that we thought were important to discuss is transportation. And transportation can actually be a related service in the individualized education program. But we also talked about different forms of transportation with any of our kids. And we're about a week and a half out for my kiddo to start school. And I have not heard from the transportation company yet.
We usually hear like 3 days before or something.
Right. But it's okay to call. It's okay to call the transportation company that serves your school. The school is probably going to tell you, if you called the school, to call the transportation company. I've seen them out. They're probably running the routes. And they're going to give you an estimated time of pickup for your child. They're going to ask you where they live, all that fun stuff. And like I said before, if they're not on an IEP and they do not qualify for special education services, and that's not written in their IEP for transportation, they live within a mile of the school, they will not qualify for transportation. So you'll have to determine whether or not you're going to walk, or they're going to walk, or ride their scooter or their bike or their skateboard, or how they're going to get to school. But always have a backup plan. Those practice that route, practice. If they are going to ride the bus with special services, there are many different methods, and we'll talk about that too in September's workshop. But there are methods to how those are provided and what is available for that. Does your child need a harness or an aid on the bus, or how's that going to work when they get off the bus at school? I think you had an interesting story about your experience.
It kind of goes and ties along with preparedness and everything. You think you have every little thing. Okay, I got this. We know which bus it is. We've talked to the bus driver. We've talked to the aide. We've got a real good relationship with special education staff and everything like that. So last year we put Alex on the bus. There he's got the aid and everything, and we're like, all right, see ya. And then like it actually dawned on me, I have no idea who's actually getting him off the bus. I don't know if the special education teacher has talked to that aide knows to not just say, okay, Alex, go into school, because that might not happen. So we actually drove to school real quick and say, wait, and just make sure that they knew. And in the case, it was the same person from last year. It's like, oh yeah, we're good. But you never know. It could be a different person.
If you didn't drive there, you could have seen Alex.
Yeah, so it's always the little things that you don't think about that can kind of torment you a little bit. But that's, again, start early and figure out those things that might come up. Yeah, so that was my story last year, but it was all good.
Awesome. Yeah. So, and then if you do qualify for the bus system and transportation services, that doesn't mean that you have to use the bus. school starts at 7:40 for high school this year or next year, which means we're probably going to have to get him up at 6 something just to get on the bus. And I don't know if we're willing to do that. That's really early.
Yeah, that was the same thing happened to us. Like like this was a couple of years ago. We learned that Adam's school, if his school's starting at this time, but the bus is, picking him up at like 5:45 in the morning or something. I don't know, 6 in the morning. So how long is he on the bus for to go? Maybe a mile or two.
Right.
And would it be easier to just drive, drop him off or pick him up? So every year it's sort of the same thing. We learn what the ride time is for both in the morning and afternoon, and we determine whether or not it's going to happen. I think the last 2 years we pick him up from school. At least Alex, we'd pick him up from school because we lived within a mile, or he could sit on the bus for like 45 minutes to an hour. So it's like, let's go pick him up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think too, remembering to share those positive experiences with the bus company. That's an interesting amount of time during the day, and unsupervised, as much as they try to do their best, there's a lot that a bus driver has to deal with. And remembering that they are part of that team, regardless of what services your child is receiving, special education or not, they're part of that education team, and they're important. And the bus drivers, I think, get forgotten a lot, and they have a hard job. They have a really hard job. So thank a bus driver. So self-care is tip number 9. We forget about ourselves. We forget about taking care of ourselves, allowing for some downtime. Praise our kids for doing a good job and trying, reduce distractions, allowing for just some time to veg out and do nothing. That's okay. Scheduling time to do nothing, or family time, meditation, I don't know, whatever you guys like to do in your own time, whatever fills your bucket, recharges you and your family.
Yeah, and don't just wait for those free times to happen. Plan for them. Say, hey, on Thursday, let's do this.
Yep.
Whether it's for yourself, whether it's for your children, or whether you want something as a family, plan for that. And then, don't take your phones, just kind of get off the grid for at least a couple hours. So.
And maybe schedule some time to be off of social media. I was talking to Heather, our arts coordinator, and we were talking about, and she brought up something pretty interesting, talking about how right now social media, there's just a whole lot of negativeness on social media, and we're inundated with that. And the only way to get rid of that negativeness and remember that there's positive stuff in the world and good things going on is to just turn it off and engage in each other and go do something for each other and remember that there are good things in the world, and it's not all just this awful stuff happening in our faces, and that it is just these little things that are happening, and there's so much more good going on, that we need to remember that, and that will help recharge us. So not everything on social media and on the TV is bad, but just remembering that all we're going to be given is that stuff sometimes. So just turning it off. And I know I'm preaching and that's a personal thing, but she did remind me that, we are going to be given some of that stuff, and that's fueling that fire. So helping our kids remember to do things for others, and being part of the solution, ask them what they like to do, ask them what they want to do. Let's give them the tools to come up with their own solutions. What do they like to do? Do they want to play video games, or do they want to play I don't know. I forget to ask my kids. I do what I want to do and make them do it with me. And I forget to ask them what they want to do. And even as much as I don't want to do it, I have to sometimes force myself to do what they want to do and give them the choice to let them make up the story and do it. And just that's part of self-care and getting to know them and creating a relationship. And then the last one is emergency preparedness and coming up with an emergency action plan. And I think that this came up because of some fire drills and I thought of it and not because of what recently happened in the world, but we had an incident where in our family where my son uses a feeding tube and he's hooked up to a feeding tube at night, and we were presented with some respiratory issues, and we needed oxygen at night and a BiPAP machine at night. So this poor kid got a feeding tube, oxygen, and a BiPAP machine. So I'm like, if we had a fire in our house, how the heck am I going to get him out fast? So what am I going to do in an emergency? He's hooked up to a machine, up to the walls. Like, we're not getting out fast. What on earth are we going to do in an emergency? So I was trying to figure it out, and I don't know. So we had to come up with a plan. And so we were like, so what are we going to do at school? What are we going to do when, he's incontinent and requires 100% assistance to do everything? If he's in the bathroom with 2 aides, because you have to have 2 aides in school and there's a fire drill, what's the plan? Can you tell me the plan? If he has a seizure on the bus, what's the plan? So coming up with that emergency preparedness, the emergency active plan. Does he have a buddy who's going to be in charge? Can we provide that peer support for our kids who need extra assistance? Does it always have to be an adult? Can it be a peer mentor or peer support? We have backup plans to our backup plans to our backup plans.
And then I would even say, even though you have all those plans in place, I'm looking at one of these allergies, for example. If you have a child who is on an IEP, and even if there's an allergy listed in a health plan as a part of the IEP, and even though everybody knows it's in there and it's implemented, you never know. You got it. That's why you keep up on the communication. You talk about, oh, how's his, the allergies, he's staying away from those types of food. Reinforce what is already being implemented in the IEP, because just because it's in there, it might not get followed just because nobody talks about it. So just really reinforcing, especially things like that, important things like that. So.
Yeah. And then if there's needed an extra support, has your school been through that first responder training? I was so pleased with our high school, with our school district. They did a first responder training. I wish for everyone else, we happened to be traveling, and I really wanted my son to be part of that training. We were out of town because there was no call. There was a call for students to be there, but it wasn't a call for kids with special needs to be part of that training. And I was so disappointed because I wanted him to be there, because those opportunities just aren't, and to bring that awareness to our kids who might be sensitive to noise. Our cities and our bigger cities are getting that training more and more, and our parents are becoming better advocates at getting that done. But I think as we provide more and more training and more advocacy, we can get these smaller areas in these bigger towns to provide that, what do first responders do for our kids with autism that struggle to, that are afraid of noise and are afraid of change, and who do we go to and who do we talk to? you know, do we have, there are many organizations around that have those autism awareness kits available. Jerome is doing a great program where they have, they're training their first responders and their school districts, and helping identify if there's someone in the home that has certain needs, and providing that all free, ID bracelets, things like that, for our kids.
I like I think I saw one where it had like a little, I have autism on your seatbelt. I may
cool.
resist you if you try to help me or something. So
that is
stuff
really
like
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So reach out, let us know what you guys have seen, what you use, so we can pass that along. We'd love to help out and do that. So I think that is it. If you have any concerns or thoughts, we're here. I wouldn't say 24/7, but you can email us at parents@idaho.org.
Feels like today feels like it.
That is going to be the fastest way to reach us. You can call our intake line and leave us a message, but the parents@idaho.org, when we're traveling, we do check our email and are able to get to that faster. So, and we'll be in East Idaho next week doing parent meetups, and that information's on our website. But we hope you enjoyed and got something out of tonight. Do we have any questions out there?
Waiting to see if anyone is going to ask a question.
Did you guys have any thoughts or questions, or?
No
pressure.
I know. The autism awareness kits, where are they coming from? Where are these stickers, and where's this stuff coming from?
So I know Autism Speaks has some stuff, but I have it written down. There's a group in Jerome. She's just a sweet little high school girl who wanted to do a service project. If you sign in on the sheet over there, I can get you her contact information. Her mom works for the Justice Department down there, and they saw a need in their community, and it was amazing. So they ordered all the red box, I think is what it was called, and they mailed these. They're just these amazing kits that had window stickers for your home, alert bracelets, and posters that they could pass out. It just came in this like cute little box full of all kinds of stuff. Laminated tags. Yeah, it was cool. So yeah, it was red box because it reminded me of the movie, the red box. I'm like, how'd they get away with that?
I think that maybe we haven't got anybody actually responding here.
Oh, okay. Well, you'll get an email link to a survey. So please fill that out. It's important for our funding and how it helps us serve you better. So be honest. It helps us do a better job. And thanks.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll see you next month.
Okay.
What is your next month?